There are some places in life where success cannot quiet the soul. A man can have the house, the title, the authority, money, influence, can have recognition, but they still not have peace when his head hits the pillow at night. And that's where we find Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 4. He's not in prison or on the battlefield. He's not even being threatened by another army. He's not in poverty, or he's not even weak in the eyes of the world at all. He is at rest in his house and flourishing in his palace. But then God gives him a dream, and suddenly the palace cannot comfort him. The throne's not steady to him. Wise men can't answer him. And we have a religious system of Babylon that cannot explain what heaven has spoken. And that is the mercy of God. Sometimes God will trouble a man's rest before pride destroys his soul. And sometimes the disturbance is not the enemy. Sometimes the uneasiness is just not stress. And sometimes the heaviness in the night is God saying, I am trying to get your attention before you go too far. So today we're stepping into Daniel chapter 4, verses 4 through 9, and we're looking at the moment when the king of Babylon discovers that Babylon has limits. This is Two Faithful Brews and the Good News.
Two faithful brews and the good news. Join the ride with open hearts. Together we'll discover God's word and where it starts. Dive into the pages, lessons old and new. Every sip of wisdom brings light to the view.
Welcome back to Two Faithful Brews and the Good News. I am Paul Purifoy, and I am sitting here with Uncle Royce, and we're still in Daniel chapter 4. Daniel 4 is Nebuchadnezzar's testimony, and he's not just telling the nations what he built and conquered or how great Babylon became. He is telling the nations what the Most High God did toward him. And this chapter is not just about a king who had a strange dream. It's about a king who had already seen the power of God, but still needed to surrender to his rule. And Nebuchadnezzar had already seen Daniel interpret dreams in chapter 2. He had already seen Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be delivered from the fiery furnace in chapter 3. And he had already confessed that there is no other God who could deliver after that sort. But even after it, there was still pride that was in the heart of this man. And that's a warning that every one of us need to hear. A person can respect God and still not surrender to him. And a person can acknowledge God's power, but still be resistant to God's authority. And we can admire truth and still try to keep control of the throne of our hearts. And that's where the problem lies. And in Daniel 4, God begins to deal with that pride. Now, I think this is going to take more than one episode because we're not going to rush through it, try to get through this whole chapter. And today we're going to begin with verses 4 and probably through verse 9. So this section shows us the king's comfort, the troubling dream, and the failure of Babylon's wisdom, and Daniel being called in because he carried revelation that Babylon did not have. So let's begin.
Okay, we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar got back. He done give God all the reasons why he's doing this. He's back into his place. And that verse 4 said Nebuchadnezzar was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. So and he said that the man is taking it easy. He's done moved into a place with all his power and authority and every good thing he's got going on. And he's sitting there and he's considering what's going on and talking about his choices. And he said, I am flourishing in my palace. Now, I don't know for sure what that word flourishing means, but you know what, Paul? Sound to me like the man then got kind of relaxed and lazy, and he's taking life easy, perfectly content with his life. I don't know if we ever get to that place or not, but he was in the upper echelon. He was moving as a king. He was sitting into that place of leisure.
Yeah.
Sort of
Well, if
reminds
I'm
me of
looking at
Donald
flourishing
Trump.
in his palace, that's kind of an idea that it was thriving. It was prosperous. He was living in the fullness of what Babylon could offer him and provide.
And God
and
brought that in the
that kind of
70 years of that he's going through with Babylon taking over the Jewish people. You know what really makes it nice is I think he gives consideration not so much to the Jews, but he has built up a relationship with Daniel. He's built up a relationship with the three Hebrew children. He has built up a relationship with all of these magicians, these astrologers, all of these wise men. We talked about them a little bit in the last chapters and we moved into it. So he's in a place now where he feels like, you know what? My life is good. I'm in a place, and I'm in this place because God has blessed me. That's what we heard in these first three verses. God blessed me. He's moved me into a place, and
yeah.
because of it and the blessings that's there, I have a life that is worthwhile. I wonder how many today, you and me, or in our churches, or wherever we might happen to be, does our mind move us into that place when we stop and we look at what's in it and we ask ourselves, am I satisfied with where I am? Do I have problems in my life? Do I have things going on? I, I don't think I'm in anything to do with princes and governors or anything of that nature, other than the fact that I go out and vote every once in a while. I wake up every morning, take a look around me, see the circumstances that's there. And I don't think that's where Nebuchadnezzar was at. He ain't sitting where we was. He's an echelon or two above us. He is sitting up in a place to where he feels like, hey, I'm in a place now to where I am in control. I wonder how many people in life today have that feeling. Do they really feel like they have got their lives where they want them and everything that's there? I'm sure a lot of people do. Yeah, people that are influential, people that are successful, people that are well educated, people that are into a political arena to where they feel like that the decisions and choices they make are bringing results. And we think about it. Some of us think, well, thank you, God, Lord, for what's there. Others say, you know what? I worked hard to get to this place. Sort of like the rich man that said, hey, I got all this stuff. I'm fixing to build bigger barns. I'm going to fill them up and then I'm going to lay back and take my ease. I don't know for sure if that's where Nebuchadnezzar was at, but I do think that he'd reached a place to where he was in and I know this word is so underrated, but I think many times we just use it, and people say, how's life? Life is good. I'm just satisfied. I am satisfied. I have got it. I'm going to sit back and take my leisure. I don't know that Nebuchadnezzar's got there yet, but I do know that he's in a place to where he's relaxed and taking life as it is. And he's doing the things that probably you and I might want to do and people in the world. So I'm just saying, in the life we live today and looking at this, one of the reasons I wanted to come to this place and move in and take a look at where Nebuchadnezzar was is because at one point in time in his life, he's made some pretty poor choices. He has made choices, even in this, he's already gone through it. And what we're looking at, he already understands the other end of it, kind of like we are in Revelations with the church. When we read it, we haven't got there yet, but we will. But when we're looking at what's going on with him, he's saying, I'm in my palace. And then that fifth verse, I want to get there and then I'll let you comment a minute because I think there may be a couple of things you have thoughts on. But he said, I saw a dream. Now, I'll let you pick up on that. I saw a dream, which made me afraid. And the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. So this is the inner man we're talking about. We don't think about it much. We don't think about that spiritual man and what's there. But every one of us have one. We got the Spirit of God, Spirit of man, the Spirit of Satan that indwells within us and indwells within this world and was outside this world. We know that God himself is a spirit and he's outside this world and he has control of all these things. But Paul, he's pretty much abdicated that to our choices if we are looking towards him from the spiritual point of view. But he's made us in the physical. He's made us in the emotional. And that's kind of where Nebuchadnezzar's sitting right now. He's reached a place now to where I'm in a point to where something inside me has unsettled me. I've got things happening, remind me of Job chapter 4 when you get right down to it, and that spirit that went after Eliezer, and he used it against Job. But he's in a place now where he's talking about the dream that he had. Well, if you're in a dream, you're probably pretty much asleep, I would think. But then it said, the vision that's in my head troubled me. So now comment a little bit about those first two verses, what it is about Nebuchadnezzar and where he's at. Why do you think he's come to the place to where now he's got a battle inside? His heart and his mind is now being brought in. His emotions are brought in and he's dealing with that. But when he said, I saw a dream and it made me afraid. So we're seeing many things taking place in his life at this moment. So let's talk a minute about that and ask ourselves, what exactly is it that he's doing, he's struggling with, and he's having to talk about it.
What we have in verse 4, Uncle Royce, is we've got this man that's in the palace. He's all up in his happiness. He's comfortable, settled. He's surrounded by greatness. And we get to see that there's a powerful thing that comes through here, because sometimes the most dangerous portion that we get to see in life is when we get to a place where our pride is not in the battlefield. Sometimes that pride, when it's in the palace, is very dangerous for it. So when a man is fighting for survival, he may know he needs help. But when a man is flourishing and comfortable and surrounded by the evidence of all success, we get where pride will start whispering this: you built this, you secured this, you deserve this, and you are the source of this. So now that pride begins to talk to us and build us up. And the Aramaic word behind the idea of being at rest, it carries the sense of ease, security, and settled comfort. So here he's not restless because of an enemy outside the gate. He's resting in the success of his own kingdom. And that's where the flourishing comes in. So the flourishing brings us to a question: what good is flourishing in the palace if the soul is not surrendered to God?
Okay, I
So
like that.
a palace can cover a lot of noise, but it cannot create true peace. So we get to see on the outside, Nebuchadnezzar's like this duck on the water. It sits there, looks calm and peaceful, but underneath it is churning. So he may seem like he's comfortable, but with everything that's been happening with God in the previous chapters and the things that he's seen, it's played an impact to the internal part of him, into that soul and into that spirit that we talk about a lot. And Nebuchadnezzar had the palace, but he didn't have the peace of surrender here. And that should speak, because a person can look successful and be troubled on the inside. And that's what we get. And then we get to shift over to verse 5. And he says he was afraid and troubled. And that is how quickly God can interrupt our own confidence. God will interrupt the human confidence that's there. And Nebuchadnezzar saw a dream, and that dream made him so afraid. And this was not just a strange picture that was passing through his mind. It was a message that now had truly gotten under the skin there. Because when God really reaches and bothers you, it's to the core of a being. And that's what he says. It's troubled him deeply.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the word troubled shows agitation, alarm, and inner disturbance. So the king is not just curious here. He's actually shaken. And then you get to notice where it happened. The thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head trouble me. You know where that's at, Uncle Royce? That's in the quiet place.
That means that
So
we've
in
moved
the day,
into,
Nebuchadnezzar.
yeah, he's moved into a place in the
Go
spirit
ahead.
now, and that inner man is beginning to work. You know, we don't often think about that spiritual man that we are, that God has communication with, and also Satan has communication with it. And I'm going to say that in this instance, there was a point in time when we would have been looking on the other end of this trouble and these visions that's there, and we would have been given some attributes to Satan as to what's there, because in his life, he's not been where he's at right now. So what he's doing is he's making a relation as to what I have. And you know what? I don't know whether you think about it or not. I have a hard time moving away from the relationship when it comes to what's going on in the world today, not only in the church, in our personal lives, in our government, in our countries, in our world. We're dealing with this out yonder in God's universe that we're looking at today, and whether there's any people there, whether there's not. But we're looking at a man now that has come down to a place of where this has troubled him to the point that spirit of man is beginning to stir him, has begun to move him into a place. And Paul has got him looking for answers. He's beginning to try to understand, because what this has done, this has stirred his spirit. This has moved him inside the man. We're just in the church body today. A lot of Christians we find ourselves in this way. We get caught up with things in the world. We think we're in control. That's where Nebuchadnezzar is. He feels like he has control of everything. But what he's got right now is the very circumstances and things that he's in and has been in Now he's looking at it, and those emotions, everything that's happening to him as an individual and as a soul, and the spiritual man that's in him has moved him into a place to where there's no compatibility now. There has been, for all practical purposes, there is a structure of hindrance has moved up between him as an individual, his heart and his mind, and that spiritual move that we have to have. Because, God told us, he said, when we come to him, he said, I'm going to write my laws in your heart, and you will, by nature, do those things that are pleasing to me. And I kind of think we may be seeing a little bit of that in Nebuchadnezzar right here, but in this place where he's at and where he was sitting, he had not experienced this up to this point, and the emotions that was moving him and troubling him had him into a place, Paul, to where he was looking for answers. He's trying to find out what it is that's happening here and why it's taking place, because all of a sudden, where a few minutes ago, or when I went to bed tonight, I was comfortable, I was relaxed, I had things my way. Now all of a sudden it seems like emotionally and inside me I'm unsettled. I've got there and I'm looking for answers. And do we do that today? Do
Yeah.
we do that? Okay. And that's kind of what I think we have to look at in the church today. I'm not sure that we move into these places and try to find answers when we don't know what they are. We have to, if we don't have a knowledge of it and an understanding of it, we have to understand that we don't understand. And because of it, we've got to find an answer before we can be satisfied with who we are in our heart, our mind, our body, and our soul, and even the spiritual man that's there. Because what we're seeing now is Nebuchadnezzar's not looking towards Satan. He's looking right straight back towards answers. And where's he going to go? He's going to his wise men and the people that are there. Still, where he's at as that king, he's still going to those people he's got confidence in. He's going to those people looking for answers, although at this point in time, I'm not real sure how much confidence he has in most of them, because they've let him down before. They have left him in places before to where he didn't get the answers, and he had to go and had to have somebody tell him. We often don't know, and we don't listen when people start trying to talk to us and have us to listen and hear things. We don't often get to the place where he's at right now, and he's looking at it, but he's got this. But he said he made a decree in that 6th verse to bring in all of the wise men of Babylon. And that takes in quite a few different places. That gets into places that we don't think about. We're talking about astrologers, the Chaldeans, according to this, soothsayers. We read on into these, and he said, I want them that they might make known unto me the interpretation of my dream. Now, I don't know about you. I haven't had a dream in any of these areas. A lot of people may not have, but we've got things in our life and of which Satan is not guiltless. He has been very instrumental in moving things into our lives. And we think, well, I've got control of my life. I know what's it. This wasn't Nebuchadnezzar's thinking. That's what he was thinking when this was all going on. I'm perfectly happy, but I'm looking for answers because I don't have them. But he feels secure in the fact that I can find the answers. I don't have them, but I can bring these wise men in. I can make this decree, and I'm going to bring them in, and they're going to give me the answers I want. If they don't, there's a price to be paid. And you know what? We don't think about it, but Paul, if we listen to the wrong people and we have the wrong information come our way, and we have all these wise people come into our lives and start talking to us and moving to us, before we know it, we're buying in because what they say and do sounds good, and we no longer are in control. They are. We've got people that comes into our lives and choices that have been made. They come in and they begin to affect us. They move directly into our lives, just like it did with Nebuchadnezzar. He's looking for answers. He's moving in. And I'm not trying to keep all these verses separated. So any of them you want to go back to or come in and input in any of this, you just let me know and I'll hush. Because I like to hear your points of view. I know God moves things with you with it, but where he's at right now and where we're at today, we're kind of parallel with each other in the world today and where Nebuchadnezzar was, because he's moved into a place in the Lord now, and what he's doing is he's telling the people, hey, this is what I went through, this is what I experienced, and I'm sharing this because you need to know and understand that there is an inner man, there is a spirit, there is not only a soul, but there is a spiritual man that my heart and my mind moves to. And as long as I rest there, I'm doing good. But I get caught up, and you do too. He's doing the same thing. He's looking at these people and he's going at it and he's talking to him. So on these, while we're
Yeah.
going, where he went to, do you feel like he accomplished anything with these that he went to first?
Well, I kind of want to go back for just a moment before I hit into verse 6 there on the verse 5 is because I don't want us to miss a big thing in that is we get to see that Nebuchadnezzar's dream was not cruelty that he saw. So the interesting part is the fact that it bothered him so much, but it was in the place where the heart has to face what it has been avoiding. And that's what the dreams bring into revelation to him. It's all a personal thing. But this dream, it wasn't cruelty, it was mercy. It was before judgment came, God was giving this warning. He says, before the tree was cut down, God sent a dream. And before the king here lost his reason, God troubled his thoughts. That's mercy because sometimes God warns before he wounds. And
Yes,
that's tough to say because we don't want to say God wounds and God hurts. And the truth is, God is not necessarily hurting us. What hurt was his own pride. So sometimes trouble comes and he troubles us before he breaks us.
that's true. That's very
And
true.
sometimes he disturbs the palace before he cuts down the tree.
That's
So
also true. Yeah.
there are
But that's that part of
times
that
when,
that's part of that spiritual man that we've got though, Paul. I mean, when you just stop and think
yeah,
about it, I know we're talking about relational here, not just with Nebuchadnezzar, but the things that we deal with every
right.
day. And that's what you're talking about right now. This is exactly where we wind up in the things that we deal with every day. And when this stuff comes into our lives, we know that many times we're caught with stuff not because God did it, but because God allowed it, or that God
Yeah.
motivated because He sees many times there's a weakness in us. Let's go back. We're not mindful of that spiritual man the way that we should be many times. The church is not even mindful of it. Nebuchadnezzar for sure was not mindful of it before Daniel come along. And having Daniel in his life moved him into a place. So what you're saying right here, see, when you back up and look at this and you try to bring it in, that 6th verse where he talks about he made the decree to bring these wise men in. Do you think that was a wise move on his part? That was a choice he made. He made that choice. He brought that into his life and he's directly moving what? In order to find an answer to a problem that he's got. We don't know. But he's reached a place to where the worry and desperateness and sleeplessness now is with him. We have the same thing happen to us. When's the last time you had a dream or a vision at night and it disturbed you and you woke up the next morning and didn't feel too good and you wasn't satisfied and you feel like something ain't right? And I think that's a lot of what we see here, don't you? That not only with him but with us, that moves into our lives. And what you're saying about that tree getting cut down, we don't think much about it, but sometimes these circumstances and things we have in our life is kind of like that place we're in. We may be that tree, and I'm sorry, I get over in Hebrews when we start talking about not in Hebrews but Romans, and I begin to think about that vine. We're in that vine. God is that vine. That spirit that we're in, where He's sitting right now, that is that vine. It's moving right there, and that's been moved. We're talking about where that moved to the Gentiles and moved away from the Jewish people. And while Daniel was a Jewish person, Daniel was also well rooted in his relationship to his God. Nebuchadnezzar had lots of gods, but now right now he's looking at one certain place and he knows I'm not going to get that answer going to where I'm going, but I'm going, and he went there first. We do the same thing in the world,
Yeah.
don't we? Don't we go looking for answers in the world before we go to God?
Yeah. And, that uneasiness that he has in his spirit is not something that he can ignore. And in the same things with us, when we have that uneasiness in our spirit, we don't ignore it. But that uneasiness, it may be conviction, or it may just be a warning of some sort. It may be God calling us back before pride takes us further than we ever intended to go. Because the truth is, you and I both know that we have pride that sits in our hearts, and pride can put itself in the throne of our hearts and put God over in another box and say, okay, God, I believe and I trust in you here as long as it fits within the rule of my life and what I think my life should be like. So God has to put himself back on the throne. And this is where we need discernment, because we need to be able to discern what God may be saying at times like this. Because not every
Yeah.
troubling thought is God, and not every
Yeah.
dream is a message from God, and not every restless night is going to be some warning. But we
That's
should
right.
never become so spiritually dull that we cannot ask, Lord, are you trying to show me something?
But at that
So,
moment, and I won't try to move into that point you just made. At that point in time in our lives, we're caught up in a situation to where we feel like that we're moving and we're looking, we're not finding it, but we tend to want to separate and move apart and even at the same time we're trying to move into that relationship with God. Paul, if we're not careful, we're moving out of that relationship with God. And God is the one that needs to be in control. But when we're still, that pride you were talking about a while ago kind of comes in here, because that pride gets in the way and it builds a wall. It moves a wall between us and God if we're not careful. So we're looking at this, and I kind of think when he's talking about what he did with the decree and what's in there, I think that's kind of what Nebuchadnezzar's done, is moved, and we do the same thing. Our family and things they bring into our lives, we think we've got control on it. So we'll go find somebody, whether it's a preacher, whether it's a book that somebody's written, whether somebody's gave us something that's important to us, whether we've got him, before we know it, we made idols out of it. They become idols in our life. They become that answer to what we're looking for. And that begins to influence us in our personal lives and moves us, and we don't think about it. And we think we're going the right way. But what we've actually done is we started to place our faith into the idols, the work, the beliefs, and the things that we do. And that's where we wind up. And before we know it, we have lost the benefits of what God has given us, and we no longer can catch a hold of them. Our prayers become useless. If we're not praying, we're out in our jobs, the ability that we've got to function and do the things we need to do, the relationships with our families. All of these things come into play, and that's kind of what Daniel's looking like here as he looks at that. So when he makes that decree and brings them in, the question that I'll ask and think about, because I do think it's important, that doing this, Daniel is reaching out to the world before he looks to God, before he looks to a place to where has had a working relationship that has been foundationally based on truth and reality, and he knows that that works because he has seen it in his life. He has seen it, but yet right now he's going back to the kind of like Adam and Eve with the in Garden of Eden when they made them fig leaves and put them in. We go back into the world and we begin to look at something that we have a familiarity with and that we feel close to that, even though we've never really reached out to hold that or try it. We allow it to come in because that's where we're putting it. We've tried it in the past. It didn't work too well, but this time we want to maybe add an extra stitch or two here and there. And if we just tighten this up in this area a little bit, then what I'm trying to do will work. And I don't know, but that's what Nebuchadnezzar, when he's talking about this, he's kind of placing it. I think he kind of wants people to understand you can't go and look in some place if there's not an answer. You've got to find the place where the truth is at. The foundation with which it works, we have to find it. And I'm not
Yeah,
sure that in this sixth and
I
seventh
agree to
verse
that.
that's not there. Go ahead.
I agree to that because, what you see here in this part of verse 6, therefore made I a decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. So I think it's important that we notice at the very beginning of that, we got to watch what Nebuchadnezzar does first. And you had mentioned it, he makes that decree, right? Well, what is a decree? That is a king language. So the first
It's
place
a
that
commandment.
Nebuchadnezzar goes to, yeah, he's beginning to operate out of a place of authority. You cannot interpret what God has out of a place of authority. You have to
But
interpret what God wants or gives out of a place of humility.
and yet that's
So
exactly what we see with Daniel here in this little verse, because he said, I want them to interpret that dream. So he's actually moving them into the place I want them to go look at. I don't want them
you
looking
mean
to the
you
left or
mean
the right. I want them
Nebuchadnezzar?
to go to that dream. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, you had said Daniel. You meant Nebuchadnezzar, right? So
I said, Daniel, well, bless his heart. We'll
yeah,
get
yeah,
to him
you did.
sooner or later because he's the only one in this whole bunch that's got any brains. Go ahead.
So yeah. So we still see here he has power. He still knows how to command a room and he knows how to summon the experts, but he is using authority to try to solve a problem that authority will never solve. So he brings in all the wise men of Babylon, and these are the people that, of course, he's trusted for so long. Babylon's trusted, that they have voices. They are the voices of the system, so to say. And these are the experts of the empire. And they're the ones that had all the spiritual reputation, the status, everything about them and they knew every method that Babylon operates by. But the problem is the dream came not from anything that they do, but it came from a source that Paul deals with on wherever it is he's at that time when it's talking about the unknown God. To Babylon, this is an unknown God. So the dream came from God himself, and Babylon's wisdom was about to run out of road, so to say. And that's the
And I'm
major
not
theme in
entirely
Daniel.
sure that Nebuchadnezzar was looking at this from the standpoint of it being from God and that dream being there, but I think he's wanting us to look and recognize and understand we cannot always dictate. When we're looking for information, we have got to have an open mind and be willing to let others come into our lives and talk to us, and then trust the Spirit of God to move us into a place to where those things that we're seeing, those things that we are hearing, and what we've caught up in now, that they are bearing witness that there's reality to it. But if we try to direct that person, or we try to direct that circumstance, and we try to tell them, this is where I want you to go, I think maybe Nebuchadnezzar's wanting them to say, wait, if we're going to do this, we can do this way, but if we do, we better do it with the understanding that we may not get what we're looking for. And I'm not sure that Nebuchadnezzar, that's not one of the things that he's doing. I'm going to go here, but I'm not entirely satisfied with what this decree is going to be. So what
Well,
do we
yeah, I
do
mean,
when that happens to us? Do we tend to try and
well,
to give direction to those that's giving us advice and tell them what advice we want? I
yeah.
wonder about that.
Well, I mean, we always try to give people advice as long as it doesn't affect us. And this is what we live in. We live in a world that's full of voices. We have experts on everything, opinions on everything, algorithms, platforms, commentators. We have prophets who are not prophets, teachers who don't know the word of God, influencers who speak like they have confidence, but they don't have any kind of revelation to them. So we have people who run from the voice to the voice trying to get peace. And it doesn't
Yeah,
work that way.
that's true.
The
So
but
what
if the
winds up
issue
happening,
is
we wind up without the satisfaction. We don't have the satisfaction we're looking for now. This has left
yeah,
us
I
in a
mean,
place
because
where we're
we're talking
in
about
worse shape than we were before.
we're talking about the place that you love to talk about. We're talking about the issue here is spiritual.
Right.
So you're not going to solve it with any physical thing. Babylon's wisdom is not going to solve it out of this. So Nebuchadnezzar had power, but he still called the wise men because he needed an answer. So how do you see that works for us today when people are troubled inside and start looking everywhere for answers before they ever humble themselves before God?
Well, I think you just brought in
How
the
do-
place that we've been, pride. I think it sits in here. And we find ourselves caught up, which I think with Nebuchadnezzar, and the fact that he's rehashing and going back through and saying, hey, I finally come back and worked through this, but I had to go through the failures before I could reach the success. And looking at this, but the pride is what moves. The same thing happens with us today, Paul. When we don't get what we want with people, when we try to make dictates, when the Spirit of God moves us, and we try our best to do the things that are pleasing to God and they're not happening. The one thing I've learned over the years, you may want to comment on this a minute, but it's when that happens, I find myself many times caught up in the place to where this should be right, but I don't have a peace about it. There's something within it, and the answer that I've got does not seem to be the right answer. It may be a good answer. It may be a possible answer, but it is the one that the Spirit wants us to embrace. Have we moved into a place to where now we have made the decision, even though we've done it to what we think is going to be best for us as individuals, but the Spirit of God says, no, when you do this, if you do it, I'll still be with you and I'll work with you. But where you're fixed to be, you're not going to find rest and peace because you cannot control what's coming from this. And what you may get tomorrow may very well be something that you don't want, but now you've made this choice. And that might be why we're sitting there and saying, this is it. This looks good, but I'm not sure. And I don't have a peace that this is going to turn out the way that I felt like it would. Do we do that? Okay. And that's kind of where Nebuchadnezzar's at. So, but he, I think when he did this, he left it. And this is what I'm just going to be honest with you. This is one of the reasons why I was kind of surprised when they never brought this chapter up in our Sunday school lessons up front with Daniel and placed it and studied it, but they left this completely out and just bypassed it. And I remember when it happened, and I looked in my book and saw that it wasn't there. Went from one Sunday to the next and saw, no, that's not where they are. And I thought, why in the world would they not want to study, understand, and teach this fourth verse? Because there is so much in it that's relational to the lives of us today. It's relational to the church. We don't think about it, but what we're looking at right now, this goes directly into the body of Christ. From start to finish, this is there. That's where Nebuchadnezzar's at. Even with the failures that he had, he's still in that place. But now, unless you got something else you want to bring up in here, I'm about ready to move on in and look at this. And he said, I told them the dream in that seventh verse, called them in. He said, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. Now, they had that dream. Evidently, from the way this reads, he gave them that dream. That tree he gave them, he talked to them about
Yeah,
it, but
yeah.
they had no answer for it. So what do we
Well, that's
do when
because
we
there's a
give, we
totally
tell
different
people?
language.
Okay.
Sometimes we feel like when we're talking to people, it feels like we're talking a different language. Because I know there's times I could talk with Alyssa or Emma, and they can start giving me some jibber jabber, and I'm like, "What did you just say? Was that English?" And the whole time I knew the word was English, but I did not understand the context from which they were speaking
So you're
because it
saying the
was
2
not
plus
making
2
sense.
come up to be the 2 plus 2 wasn't 4, it was 22. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. And so you got here, you have Babylon that has a spiritual system, right? They've got a supernatural language. They have the rituals, they've got everything. But it does not mean they had the truth because they didn't. They weren't speaking the same language. And there's a difference between spiritual activity and a divine revelation.
Mm. Well, now,
And
how in the
there's,
world did
there's
truth get in here? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how truth worked its way into this conversation, and I know why. I mean, I understand, but truth wasn't the word I was thinking about using until you used it a while ago. But that is absolutely and totally exactly what we're looking at. We need
Yeah,
to look at that
there's a
and
difference
practice it.
between mystery and truth, and Nebuchadnezzar has mystery, and he's looking for truth. Why? Truth is real.
Yeah,
You
and
cannot
he's not
deny the
happy with
truth
what he
when
got.
it's actually revealed.
Yeah, I got my answer, but it's not the answer I wanted. So I'm
Right.
now I got to find something to do with it. So we go looking. We go looking, and that's kind of where we're at again. And that's why I said you can't separate these scriptures. You've got to keep them all in text. You can't take one of them out because what they are is the happenings that has taken place in Nebuchadnezzar's life, and his telling of this story is actually the relational life of what's there and the answers that need to be, and to bring and make real to us that the truth that's here is really the Spirit of God functioning in the life as the words come out and the character of God functions. That's actually what we're seeing that's taking place here. And he's understanding, I didn't get it. I did not get that. I know that that's what I'm looking for. Even sometimes when we don't recognize it, we still have to understand that it's there and part of it. But then this eighth verse, I'm gonna fit it in. You can put it wherever you want to, because I'm gonna read it and then let you talk about it with this other. But it said at that eighth verse, it said, "But at the last, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom the spirit of the holy gods, and
Mm.
before him I told the dream, saying." So we're looking at a man now that is finally, he's bringing God into it. He's bringing the truth into it. His faith now is placed in Daniel, calling him Belteshazzar, and it's placed there. But when he talks about him, that name, because Bel, was the god that he's a believer in, or Marduk, however you pronounce that name, Mandrake, Mardrake. Anyway, Belteshazzar, he refers to him as the name of my God. But then he refers to Daniel and what the holy gods, and he refers to the spirit of the holy gods. In other words, he still did not put them on the same plane with
Right.
the God.
And that takes me right back to this place here, where it starts to really have to be revealed out of that. Verse 7 said, they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. And this is a kicker, because we must not confuse a spiritual language with the Spirit of God. How many times have you said you've got three different things that are in operation? You have the spirit of man, the spirit of Satan, and the spirit of God, and they're all working. So we cannot confuse any kind of excitement with an anointing and we must not confuse the platforms with the authority. We cannot confuse confidence with truth,
That's
because
true.
every word must be weighed, every voice must be tested, all interpretations must come under the authority of our scripture. So Paul tells us in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 21, prove all things, hold fast that which is good. And then 1 John 4:1 says, beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God. That is discernment. And discernment is needed because not every voice that's speaking about God is speaking from God. And that's why we get the next verse of 8 so important, where Daniel come into the picture here, because Daniel now comes before him, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom the spirit of the holy gods, and before him I told the dream, saying, and that's a loaded verse.
Yeah, there's a lot
Because
in it. That's why I
Nebuchadnezzar
wanted you.
says,
That's why I wanted you to talk on it a little bit, because we're seeing a lot between Daniel. I mean, we're having a meeting of the minds, so to speak. Here is what we're having. We're having to work, and there's a meeting of the gods. I mean, we think there's only one God, there's only one Spirit. But if you believe, as some people do, that I believe in the God of the tree, or I believe in the God of the cattle, or I believe in the God of whatever the Egyptian gods was, there were so many of them. Everything they did, they named a god. Nebuchadnezzar did the same thing. So when we look at this and hear him talking about my God versus the holy gods of Daniel, we're seeing a variety of thought process in that. We're seeing his point of view that he's making. And Paul here, I'm not sure that even at this, looking at it at this point, if he actually understood the fullness of what he's writing and how he's writing it. I think the Spirit of God actually was moving this man into laying down a foundation, and whoever put this down in the King James Version of the Bible has placed a truth, because there is a unity that's placed here. And he's actually, what he's doing is he's placing the unity of the Spirit of God and the spirit of man, of the body, the physical, emotional body, the heart, mind, body, soul, and spirit. He's bringing them together in a unity here, but they have kind of got here through a separation. And in order to do that, you have to completely and totally lay aside the separation, take the reality of what we've got and place it in order to come into this scripture. And I'm not sure that Nebuchadnezzar understood what he's saying, but he's speaking from the intent of his heart and the desire to know that, hey, I serve a God, but I know that those spirits of gods that Daniel has in him, they are the ones that are in possession of the truth. That's where your word come in a while ago. That's why it caught me when you used it a while ago, because I didn't really think about it from that point of view until you said that. But that's what we're looking at here. We're seeing them moving into a place and a circumstance, because now I think Daniel is even trying to prepare himself to receive what Daniel has for him. And I'll let you comment
oh,
on
sure.
those.
Well, because you have the part here where Nebuchadnezzar says, but at last Daniel came in before me.
He sure did.
At last. That's the end. And that shows us something still about the heart. That
Just real
phrase
quick,
tells us
do
that
you
there
think
is
that
a
at
heart
last he
of pride.
used? Yeah. Do you think that at last he used there means that he was kind of looking past his wise men and the decree that he made, and he was looking forward because he did not expect to get an answer in the other side? He was looking forward to where he felt like there would be some substance to what he was about to get. Is that why he used that word at last?
No, I don't think so. I think he still had, and this is why I said I think that phrase tells us still something about his heart, and that's the heart of pride, because he's still the Nebuchadnezzar that's so rooted in his rule and his traditions and the things that were there, that he was still holding that pride, that those people could do what needed to be done. He did not have the full, I don't think at this point, he didn't have that full confidence of Daniel. I think Daniel was the guy that says, okay, Daniel's done some amazing things. Daniel has a God that obviously has some power, but yet this has been working for us for so long. These are my people. I'm going to give them and let them do.
Opportunity.
So you get that heart of pride. Yeah, you get that heart of pride that's still there. So Daniel is not the first call, and he should have been. He ends up being the last call. Nebuchadnezzar already knew Daniel. He already had interpreted dreams before. He already knew Daniel served God who reveals secrets. He already knew that Daniel carried something that Babylon's wise men didn't have. But Daniel still came in last because pride often tries to everything that cannot help before it humbles itself enough to seek what can. That's the thing of pride. It doesn't want to release, and if something can help it, it brings danger to it. So you see, we get pride that will run through Babylon before it bows before God. It will ask magicians, astrologers. It asks the whole system first, and it will ask the voices that make it comfortable before it ever
Okay.
goes to find the truth.
Yeah. And you know what? Where you're doing kind of fitting into where I was fixing to go with this, because as I'm looking at this and I'm giving consideration to it, when he's talking about in whom the spirits of the holy gods, that I know that they're the ones that rule you, and that's where you get your answers from, Daniel. And when you look at that, and he gets ready to tell him the dream, he has actually moved God, Daniel's God, into a place of superiority, actually over his God. He's saying, I have a God that works. My God works where he works, but this God, this spirit of these gods has the ability to give Daniel those things that he need, and he will share the truth with me. He will give me that truth. So he's actually placing Daniel and Daniel's God in a place of superiority over even his commandments and what he's done. In other words, he said, I am going to take my authority and my power, and I'm going to place them in what I'm telling you, and I will let you give me directions and directives concerning that. And I have every intention of respecting what I get from you, and that will be where I'll base my decisions. I wonder if we do that. But I do think that's
So
what he's done here with God.
well, there's another interesting portion here to see, and that's the name change. Okay,
Okay.
Daniel's Hebrew name means God is my judge, and
Okay.
or God has judged. But his Babylon name, because they had renamed him, was Belshazzar.
Mm-hmm.
So Belshazzar is connected to Babylonian gods. Babylon renamed him, but here's the kicker again. But Babylon did not redefine him.
That's a
So
good
Daniel
thought.
still stood in his ground. So you
That is a
got
good thought.
a lot of people today that allow other people to identify them and place them because they don't know who they are. Daniel knew who he was, and Daniel had been given this Babylon name and placed in the system, trained in their learnings, positioned in a Babylonian authority. But Babylon could not take God out of him, out of Daniel. So that is one of the strongest truths that we'll ever get out of this whole section. Daniel was in Babylon's system, but Babylon was not in Daniel's spirit. So
Yeah.
he could
And
stand
and that
before the
also
king without losing his fear of God.
yeah. That also shows where Daniel Nebuchadnezzar is with the fact of his God, when actually what he's doing, and I hadn't thought of this until you just said that, but he's actually what he's doing is taking what he knows and where he knows Daniel's going and who is controlling him, and moving him actually back over into the place where in Babylon we have renamed him and brought him into a place. So we've given him the name of
Mm-hmm.
Belteshazzar that places him under my God. And so what I'm going to receive from him, this area that I'm asking him to do, is the spirits that he's going to follow that are there is the spirits of the God that he serves. But that God still, from the standpoint, even with Nebuchadnezzar, whether he realizes it or not, and I definitely do believe that he did not realize the fullness of what he was doing, even though I think he understood the fullness of what he was doing, which once again picks up your pride area that you brought in, also going with the truth. But looking at that and moving into that, it said in that process and what's there, he said, then I told him my dream, saying, so he repeated his dream. He brought it back to him and he gave it to him again. Now, I want to ask you a question there and let you move forward with it as you need to. By doing it the second time, I mean, he had done it with with the side with the wise men through his decree, but now he's doing it the second time, and he is retelling his story and his dream to Daniel from the point the second time. So is he now looking at this from the point that, Daniel, I'm releasing you, and let your spirits hear this and let them be the ones that take it and tell me what's there so I'll know what to make my decision from. Is that looking at that from that perspective? Nebuchadnezzar, I feel like, didn't want to turn loose of his God, but he also knew that his God did not have the answers that Daniel's did. and that's why he had
Oh,
him do it again.
well, I mean, so now we get over into verse 9.
Okay.
O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee, tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and in the interpretation thereof. So he does Daniel totally different. He says, tell me the visions of my dream. He didn't give Daniel the dream.
So what you're saying, he
He's
kind of
telling,
doing him now like he did the first time with the people when he wouldn't tell him his dream. He wanted them to tell him the dream and then tell him what it meant. And that's kind of what he's
and
doing
that
with Daniel now.
That's what he's doing. And Nebuchadnezzar,
Okay.
but here's Daniel, he calls Daniel master of the magicians.
Uh-huh.
So that does not mean Daniel actually practiced magic. It just means Daniel had been placed in the authority over Babylon's wise men because Daniel had revelation that none of them had. And Daniel's authority didn't come from Babylon. It came again from God. And the king says, I know that the spirit of the holy gods, little g with an S, is in thee. Now, Nebuchadnezzar is speaking again as a pagan god. He's still holding on to his thoughts of what is really there, his traditions, his pride, his thought, but his theology is still not right. He sees the evidence of God's work, but he explains it through his own perception. He knows there's something different about Daniel, and he knows Daniel carries a different authority, but yet he still will not fully surrender and believe and
So
trust that the God of Israel is real.
you don't know that he's fully understanding then that Daniel is working from the wisdom of what the Spirit has brought in and that there is a truth within what's there. And Daniel, your God possesses this ability. He's not applying abilities of his God to do anything else or being the God and the one and only God, but he's saying, Daniel, you have the answer for me here. And this is what I'm looking for. And I need the answers on what your gods have got to say in this particular circumstance and incident that I'm bringing to you. So we're looking at a place now, like in this 9th verse of what's there. And he said, I know that you're not going to be troubled by this. This is a secret part that you're not troubled by. And so he said, tell me the visions, which you just talked about. He never even told him the visions. He just placed it in his hands and left it to him and trusted him to give him the truth and the wisdom with which he applied it in a way that it needed to be done so that he would know what to do with it. But he didn't turn loose of his God. He still is holding on to his God, even though he is allowed and gave credit in the first 3 verses to these chapters to where he's at here. But this does point back once again to that first 3 chapters where he recognizes, yes, those gods did. This is what this God did. This is what this God gave me. But that interpretation that was there, and I know that it's there, and that's what he's sharing here. But he just got through basically saying, you know what, Daniel, I trust you to do what's right and tell me what I need to do because I'm not settled. I'm dissatisfied. I've got problems. I'm working with those, and I trust you to direct me and tell me what to do going forward.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that in this, notice Nebuchadnezzar does not separate the God of Israel out. He does not tell Daniel, your God. What is it? What do we notice that's different in verse 9? He says, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee.
And we're seeing separation
So he's
even in
now,
that.
yeah, we now see where Nebuchadnezzar has put the God of Israel in with the rest of the gods that he serves. So we see that in that verse.
Okay,
So
let me just ask a
Nebuchadnezzar's not
question right here
dismissing.
on this. Where he's at right there,
Okay.
and he's doing this, and he's placing that with that separation, and he's seeing that spirit there. He's looking at it, and he's applying this now from the perspective of what he discerns in his discernment and his knowledge and understanding that this is a God that I accept in the areas that it's there, but I still maintain that I am placing this still in the truth of what Daniel tells me, but under the auspices of my God. My God is still my God. I don't turn him loose. That's still the one I worship. That's still the one I turn to. That's still the one I pray to. But I do trust your God in this area to tell the truth and do those things that are there. Is that what he's trying to do here as an individual? Because we
Well,
do that.
I would say it this. I would say it probably this way. Nebuchadnezzar here, he respects and respects the evidence, but he is not fully surrendered to the truth.
Okay.
So we have people that's that way today. They see God move. They respect prayer. They admire the faith. They know that there's something real about the spirit-filled life. They even say, "I know God's with you." But they still have not bowed their own hearts to God.
And that's because
Nebuchadnezzar is
what's
in that tension
happening,
here.
they're seeing it from their perspective and what they anticipate, which means that their pride's also working. Even in the midst of that, just like Nebuchadnezzar's, our
Yeah,
pride gets in the way sometimes, and
absolutely.
we find ourselves moving that way. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so Nebuchadnezzar has that tension. He's troubled. He knows Babylon's failed. He knows Daniel has revelation, but he still speaks through his own pagan language. God's trying to move him, but he's not surrendering yet. And this is why Daniel chapter 4 matters so much. The chapter shows us the process of God trying to bring a proud man from their recognition to humiliation, and
Now,
from
another question.
humiliation to actually confession.
Yeah. Another question here. This moves
Amen.
into a place today, if we take it from Nebuchadnezzar and we begin to bring this relational point and place of thinking out into the scriptures of the Bible. When we go from Genesis to Revelations and we see the character of God laid out, when we see how God works with mankind, are we not seeing the very same thing with them where God is trying to tell them, I have patience, I can give you time, I can work with you. My benevolence is there because I know, I recognize, I understand. I'm in the past, I'm in the present, I'm in the future. Nothing is past me, and I understand it. So, what he's saying now, kind of like Nebuchadnezzar, is telling us, I'm going to work with you and I'm going to bring you along to the place. I mean, just like he took 40 years with Moses in the desert, and then it took 40 years in the wilderness for the Jewish people. Moses finally learned, even though he wasn't perfect and he lost out on the promised land, but he was able to do many things, and God worked with him on that, up to and including seeing the glory of the Lord. But in the wilderness, we saw where his chosen people and the covenants that were there, they sat in the wilderness and they could not find that peace and rest because of unbelief. Now, pride, it looks to me like will have a prominent place in the lives of the church and the life of each of us as individuals today. If we placed ourselves like Nebuchadnezzar is, and we're in this place like he is, I fear. Well, I don't know if fear is a good word. I anticipate and I have a strong belief and feeling that we would probably move and make our decisions and our choices based pretty much in the same way that Nebuchadnezzar is. That we have that's there, it's a part. And God, in his patience, says, I will work with you. I will do what I can do. And because of it, there's coming a place and a time that I am going to have to come as my son and be incarnate in man and become my own creation in order to give you a means by which you can overcome and find salvation in me, in my word, and in my truth. Is that not kind of where we'd be if it wasn't for the fact that Christ had not come and we don't have the cross and grace that we can look to? Okay. I put it that way
Yeah.
because sometimes I feel like that in today's world, just like we are in what's going on in our nation today and some of the things that are there, there's so many things that's happening in our country today and in our world and in our daily lives right here in El Dorado. We're electing people into positions. We're appointing people into positions that, Paul, they're not qualified. They're just not qualified. And yet this is where we're at and this is what we do. And we have to stop and take a look and say, when do we wake up and understand that we have the power and authority, but we have got to stand up, claim it, and walk in it. And I wonder what it's going to take for us to be able to do that. We're at a place now to where Daniel's about to step into it, but I don't think we're going to get too much more of this done today. We pretty well walked a mile in what we got here. But in what's there,
Yeah.
is there anything in here that you feel like maybe we need to look at, because I think people need to stop and look and assess their own values and look at their own selves, just like we do, and ask ourselves, God's looking at us, and as he does, is he doing us the same way he is with Nebuchadnezzar? Is he moving us into a place, because he used Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar to punish Israel. And today, I wonder if he allows us as individuals to walk through those same valleys and he's there with us. We don't even have to go hunting for him or have a faith and belief in him and find our salvation through our faith and our righteousness through our faith. But we have a promise in him. So I wonder today if God's approach to us is the same as it was with Nebuchadnezzar, or is his approach to us different from the standpoint of how he applies it and the application of his word and truth in our lives as compared to Nebuchadnezzar's.
Let's see. Let's bring it down to where we live this way, maybe. Nebuchadnezzar had power, but he did not have peace. He had wise men, but no revelation. He had a palace, but he was troubled in his bed. He had authority over a nation, but he had no authority over fear of his soul. There's something that should be humbling to us in that, because if a king can sit in a palace and still be troubled, then we need more than outward success, is what that tells me. That tells me you and I have got to have something more. We need God. We need truth. We need surrender, the Spirit of God. We need discernment in our lives. We need to know when God is trying to warn us, and we need to be willing to go to God first, not last. And a lot of times we do the same thing Nebuchadnezzar's done. We look for all the outside sources and the answers. We call mama, we call daddy, we call grandma, grandpa, we call whomever. We go to our pastor. We'll go to Sunday school teachers. We'll go to leaders before we ever just go ahead and go to God. And that's because our relationship's not in the standard of where it should be with God. Once we get our relationship where it needs to be with God, the only reason we go to the others is if we don't have clarity what may be here, and other people can help bring the clarity of what was that God's given, which is what Nebuchadnezzar's needing right now. He needs some clarity to this dream. So we also get to notice again that Daniel was in Babylon, but Babylon was not in Daniel. That tells me that we can be in certain locations in our life. We can be in certain areas. We could be around certain influences, but we can still not be part of those things. So the issue is what we allow to govern our spirit. We can either hold a hard place, we can hold to a broken system, we can hold to a life of compromise, or we can actually do what we need to do. Surrender to God, carry the truth, walk in conviction, so that we don't have Babylon living in us. And that's what we get to see. Daniel had conviction before the crisis, and he had a prayer life before promotion. He also had identity before he had influence, and he had God before he stood before the king. So that is the kind of believer that the church still needs today. That's the kind of believers we should want to be, not people who are merely angry at Babylon, or people who are secretly being shaped by the system of Babylon but still condemning Babylon. We don't need people who know the language of faith but still have all the wisdom of the system, so to say. We've got a lot of teachers, ministers, preachers, pastors. They know the language of faith, but they only know the wisdom of the system. And we also need some people that can stand in Babylon with the Spirit of God and make the proclamations. So before we close out, anything else you have there?
I guess the biggest thing that I would bring up is just to say that anybody that sees and hears this and they're looking for answers, we need to look past what we know and have knowledge of, that we base our decisions on those things that we know, and recognize that we may not understand everything that's there. But if we know and understand and believe that God is God and that truth is truth and they do not change, then we're in a position to where no matter what comes against us that we don't understand, that we don't like, that we don't recognize, but in all of these things, we have to accept the fact that we are in a life of reality. We make choices. We live with those choices. Sometimes we can control the choices we make, and as the decisions that we make, then they can be good. They can work as they should. At other times, we have to stop, recognize, and understand that I have to put my faith and trust in God regardless. And I do think that's where Nebuchadnezzar has put his, even though he doesn't fully understand that it's there and he has reservations in some areas. But I would encourage people when you're what those saying today, when you're caught up between a rock and a hard place and you don't know how to move because either way you're being crushed, that you recognize and understand that God told us, Christ said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And that's the purpose, basically, of what we're looking at here and the foundation that we need to be looking to place our lives on it. I won't try to go into some of the spiritual areas of things right now because they have to be broken down, and it takes quite a bit of the Word of God to break it down and to bring it into the fullness of the meaning of it, because we can take one scripture in the Bible and make it into anything we want to. But the one thing that I would suggest to anybody is at first recognize, do I know this God that you're talking about? Do I understand him? Do I recognize him? Or do I even want to? And if we have any thoughts whatsoever, that's something we have to think about, because spiritually, God is a spirit, but then so are we. We are spirit. Our soul and our spirit that's in man is very much there, and so is the spirit of Satan. It's one spirit of God. It was before time and is before time, but it is also in time. And God Himself, He said, "I am that I am." And I'm there, and I change not. And he promised us that he would be with us even unto the end of our days. So as we look at those and we go forth in it, as you study these scriptures and look at them, let the Spirit of God begin to move you. And when you feel that little urge inside that moves in from the heart, take time to question and recognize and understand, I don't have all the answers, but that Spirit of God that works in me, he said, I not only will be with you, but I will be in you, and I will be your helper. So with that being said, and closing out from my part of it, I just want to encourage you. We do have a helper, and he will help us know. He'll help us understand. And when we don't know and don't understand, he'll help us with that too. So as you look and think about it, and you don't, if you haven't given your heart and life to the Lord, today would probably be a good day for it. And with that, I'll let you have it back, Paul.
All right. Well, the king was at rest. He flourished in his palace, but God gave him a dream that troubled him. Babylon's experts could not interpret it, but Daniel came in at last carrying revelation because he belonged to God who reveals the secrets. And here's the word we need to carry as we close out. Do not wait until everything else fails before you seek God. Do not let your pride make God your last resort. And don't make a mistake and allow yourself to believe comfort for peace. And don't confuse the spiritual noise with revelation. And most, don't let Babylon get inside your spirit. If God's troubling your rest, ask him why. And if he's warning you, receive it as mercy. And if he's calling you to surrender, do not harden your heart, because it is far better to humble yourself before God than to let pride carry you into a place where God has to humble you. Next time, we will move in to the dream itself. We will work at the great tree, the height of it, the fruit of it, the watchers from heaven, the decree that begins to reveal what God was about to do in Nebuchadnezzar's life. So be sure to like, share, subscribe, make comments, let us know what you think. We'd love to communicate with you, get ideas of new podcasts. And with that, I'm Paul Purifoy with Uncle Royce, and this has been Two Faithful Brews and the Good News. All the best, and God bless.